James had been an emergency medical technician for a while, but never imagined he'd be in need of one himself. On the morning of a bright, sunny day while driving home from his 24-hour shift, James encountered what would become a typical end to his duty days. As James drove down the road, something leapt from the trees on the side. He swerved to dodge it, only to realize that it wasn't a person as he originally suspected, but rather an animal. James had raced across the street and traveled into a culvert at 55 miles per hour. When he applied the brakes, it wasn't enough to slow him down, and he crashed into a raised driveway with such force that it tossed him into the air. He felt the air burst against his face as he flew back. His ankle collided with a brake pedal, sending him soaring through the rail fence for about 15 feet. James initially crashed his Camry into a grassy patch, with the left side taking the full brunt of the impact. As a result, the driver's door was completely destroyed and glass fragments sprinkled all over him. After the second turn, a steering wheel ended up landing on his head. By the time of the third rotation, he was severely disoriented and couldn't recall what happened. At some point during this ride wreck, his neck fracture. James' vehicle finally came to rest, right side up facing towards the road. It was destroyed in the accident. Not one window or the sunroof was intact. The battery was flung 50 feet. The police would later figure the car had rotated 4 times. There was not one undamaged panel. James' opera body was laying across the center console with his head phased down in the passenger seat. A few moments later, a family van stomped on the side of The driver saw the skid marks on the asphalt and the bent guardrail, and knew immediately that there had been an accident. 15 minutes later, the local air ambulance was at the scene. They were dispatched to transport James in a critical condition to hospital as fast as possible. The medical professionals were waiting for them and rushed James through to ICU. James didn't remember any of this. Of course, this was what he had been told. When the assessment started, he was doing one thing, which meant he had a chance of survival, so was Blue Lad to a specialist hospital about an hour away. It would take James several months before he would regain consciousness, and the week before he could recognize people around him. But what shocked James and his wife the most was how he came. Before the accident, James was employed as an EMT in a charming small town. He would regularly express his dissatisfaction to his wife about the tedious nature of his job as it involved copious amounts of paperwork. James yearned for the opportunity to be on the front lines, actively saving lives and attending to emergency calls. As time went on, James' longing for action was eventually fulfilled. He found himself responding to a major incident, which put his skills to the ultimate test. This experience not only made him realize the value of the boring aspects of his job, but also deepened his understanding of how those administrative tasks contributed to the overall efficiency of the emergency response. Conversely, James understood that a lack of calls signified no emergencies and thus no danger for the people in this community. At times, the idea of longing for action seemed paradoxical to him as he was aware that a peaceful and safe environment meant there would be no need for urgent interventions. This internal conflict challenged James to re-evaluate his perspective on the true purpose and value of his job as an EM. Before embarking on his career as an EMT, James had worked in a fast food restaurant. After marrying his wife Luna, he decided to pursue a certification as an MT. The process took him only 3 months, and upon completion, he found himself earning $5 more per hour compared to his previous job. This significant pay raise came from relatively easy-to-obtain certification, and James was delighted to secure a full-time position just a week after graduate. However, the real financial advantage for James lay in the overtime hours he worked, which greatly contributed to his overall income and job satisfaction. The work wasn't very difficult. Vast majority of calls just needed a ride to the ER. He also had plenty of shifts where he got to relax or nap for a decent chunk of the shift. James often picked up extra shifts. There was always someone calling out. He wasn't getting extremely rich, but it was a decent living in a respected career that didn't take long to get into. James loved his job and knew it was a responsible job. Every second could make the biggest and most important difference. Majority of shifts weren't bad, but there was always the possibility of having that call that he would remember. For years in his 15 years of career as an EMT, he had saved a lot of people. He also remembered some of the toughest cases. He remembered clearly the first ever patient that he lost. He was an elderly man who was having an asthma. That day, they spent too much time on the scene. 10 seconds after placing the man in the back of the ambulance, James watched him take his last breath. This was his very first cardiac arrest as a paramedic. Even with the help of firefighters, they were unable to resuscitate him. It happened at the beginning of his career, and James always kicked himself for not having more experience. He thought he could possibly do things differently, but as the attending physician at the hospital once told him, "When it's your time to go, it's your time to go." This case continued to haunt James, frequently leaving him feeling depressed and overwhelmed by the other case that he couldn't shake off his mind was when the relationship with his wife was a bit rocky. They were living in a trailer and struggling financially, but the biggest reason for arguing was the fact that the couple had been trying to have a baby, but it wasn't working out at the time. James was drinking more than he should have. That day, it was 30 minutes prior to the end of the shift as he was playing pool with the firefighter, the tones dropped for a shooting. They arrived on scene just after the police to find a young woman sitting on the front porch crying. Apparently, she had argued with her boyfriend who had recently moved in with her. Then she went to visit a friend to cool down and came home to find him dead. It was a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the. James had to see the young men lying on the ground lifeless and confirm death for the police. James and his girlfriend were about the same age as them that evening. He went back to the trailer and hugged his girlfriend for 15 minutes sobbing. He was a turning point in his life. From that day on, he realized that life is so fragile and can be taken away any minute. Determined to make a positive change, James pulled himself together and quit drinking. He and Luna shared the dream of having a baby together. 2 years later, the young couple took another significant step forward by moving into a cozy little house, making it a warm and welcoming home in anticipation of starting a family. However, even after 5 years of trying, James and Luna still found themselves unable to conceive a child. This challenging situation tested the resilience of their relationship and forced them to confront a reality that their dream might not come to fruit. That fateful day of the accident, James had another fight with his wife in the heat of emotions. He said to Luna that there was no point in living if he couldn't have a baby. That same day he would get into an accident and go into a coma. The hallway of the hospital was busy with medical workers rushing from room to room. The consultants had previously warned James' parents to prepare for their son as being unable to walk, talk, or even identify them. Once inside the specialist hospital, James was plugged into a life support machine, which was where he stayed unconscious. The moment the medical professionals had to usher his parents out of the room due to the fact that they thought they were going to lose him, James remembered looking down on himself. He saw that there were several people working around his bed, but it was completely peaceful where he was. It was like looking through a wide aperture in that there was a lot of light present, but the focus was soft. James was aware, but curiously removed from what was going on in those moments. He was one step removed from everyday reality, just observing. There was no pressure from anything. No obligation to be anywhere or do. Time became an irrelevant concept. It just didn't matter anymore. James remembered to his left was the most pure enduring white light coming from a window. He could feel like he could move towards whatever he looked at and directed his thoughts at. He looked at the doctors working around his body and looked at the source of line. Again, he had a feeling he wanted to see what was beyond it. All it took was just a thought, and he started floating towards the. When he passed, a thick layer of white light dissipated and he saw an old man sitting on the bench in the park. James recognized the man. It was the same man who had died from cardiac arrest. He was smiling at James and telling him that what the physician told him was true. "When it's your time to go, it's your time to go." James smiled back at the old man and asked, "Is it my time to go? Do you?" At that moment, the old man just stood up from the bench and walked away. James felt weak and lost. He had a feeling that it was indeed his time to go. He looked around trying to find the source of white light. It was gone. Meanwhile, in the physical world, doctors were shrugging their shoulders. It had been a month since James was in the coma. The doctors told James' parents and wife that they're monitoring his state and will let them know if anything change. Luna found herself gradually succumbing to depression. Each morning she anxiously awaited news about her husband. She hoped for updates that he had regained consciousness, yet simultaneously dreaded the possibility of receiving devastating news. However, on that particular Sunday morning, fate had a different plan for her. Luna awoke around 6 a.m. disturbed by a lingering sensation of nausea. The feeling intensified, prompting her to believe she would vomit at any moment. She quickly rose and dashed the bathroom after several minutes of retching. However, nothing came out. Luna was worried. She thought she had messed up her stomach by not eating properly. Recently, she spent the entire morning in bed feeling utterly drained. In the afternoon, she decided to drive to the hospital. Sitting beside James, she gently held his hand. It was quiet in the room. Luna gazed at her husband for a long time, tears streaming down her face as she reflected on the days when they used to. The memory of their last argument remained etched in her mind, and she replayed the scenes over and over, causing her tears to flow even more freely. That day, Luna decided to spend the night at the hospital consumed by loneliness. She found the thought of returning to an empty home unbearable. In the meantime, James experienced a vivid dream in which he found himself wandering through a vast. In the distance, he spotted a pond shimmering like a mirage, despite feeling as though he had been walking for days. The elusive pond never seemed to get any closer. James yearned to dive into its refreshing waters and quench his seemingly insatiable thirst. At some point, he heard someone say his name, James. James. It's. The sand beneath him appeared to be sinking into an abyss, while the daylight gradually gave way to darkness. Overwhelmed by his situation, James began to cry. Falling to his knees, he desperately pleaded for help in a way out of the desolate dreamscape that held him captive. Instinctively, he started praying. "I've always longed for a child, whoever's listening, please let me see my child before I'm gone. I just want to catch a glimpse of." At that moment, everything around him started to turn white again. He didn't know where he was. He started hearing voices again, but this time the voices sounded familiar to him. They were the doctor's voices, and the white lights surrounding him was the flashlight directed at his pupils. Next, he heard his wife sobbing and she leaned toward him. James didn't understand why, but he found himself crying too. His wife held something in her hands and through her tears. He could see a faint smile on her. The voices and words gradually became clearer to James. Luna was cradling their baby wrapped snugly in a blanket in attempting to show the infant to James. "Welcome back, honey. Welcome back," she exclaimed through a mix of laughter and tears. "Do you recognize me? I'm your wife Luna." Her eyes sparkled with emotion as she beamed and cried. The room was filled with warmth and happiness as everyone around him couldn't help but smile. At the miraculous reunion, James felt a mixture of surprise and bewilderment. He couldn't immediately recognize the people around him, and he struggled to comprehend his surroundings. His mind was still reeling from the vivid dream, which blurred the line between fantasy and reality. "Hello, darling," Luna said, smiling as she wiped away her. Gently. She leaned in and planted a tender kiss on James's forehead, all the while cradling their precious baby in her arms. Here's your little princess," Luna announced, adjusting the swat so James could get a better look. Overwhelmed with emotion, James was unable to hold back his tears. His face contorted as he wept silently, too weak to make any sounds or utter a single word. Luna tenderly stroked James's, her gaze switching between her husband and their newborn daughter as he continued to cry. In that moment, James came to the realization that he had been in a coma for a long time. 2 months into his coma, Luna had discovered she was pregnant with their little girl. From that day forward, she had prayed, asking God to grant her wish for their baby to meet her. Just 3 days prior to James regaining consciousness, Luna had given birth to a healthy and beautiful baby girl, making their reunion even more miraculous and joyous. "Did you see her, babe? Did you see your daughter? Isn't she cute? She looks just like you, babe." Luna was showing the baby to James, who by now is crying tears of. The medical team had been uncertain whether James would ever awaken from his coma. However, his deep-seated desire to see his daughter proved to be a powerful force, ultimately overcoming the coma and allowing him to reunite with his family against all odds. This remarkable recovery testified to the indomitable strength of the human spirit and the unbreakable bond between a parent and the child. "She's so cute," James Luna was, "See honey, she's healthy and beautiful." The moment of meeting his daughter proved to be the greatest and most surprising gift James could have ever received. He attempted to speak, but his lips failed to form any words. Despite his miraculous awakening, James had a long road ahead of him. The medical team cautioned his loved ones that his recovery would require a great deal of time and effort, spanning several. The experience of his coma had a profound impact on James, leaving him acutely aware of the fragility of life. His dream remained vivid in his mind, and he could appreciate the beauty of simplicity. He found solace in silence and cherished the idea of extra space. Through these experiences, he began to understand the deeper connections that link all things together. He was immensely thankful for the growth he observed and treasured every moment spent with his beloved family and cherished baby. James had a close brush with death, which drastically altered his outlook on life. Following this, he pledged to make the most of each day, to express love for his family and friends, and appreciate the little blessings that life brings. After coming out of his coma, James saw the world in a new light. Gone were the things he thought to be significant, and in their place were those he had overlooked before, taking on an entirely different value. What was once insignificant now had immeasurable worth. His understanding that life could be so delicate had gifted him a deep admiration for the current moment and those he cherished. With a newfound determination, James decided to make the most of life's little joys and embrace every moment shared with those he loved.